So hey everybody, so welcome to the channel. Now today I want to talk about a topic called task forces and what can go wrong with task forces. Now the first time that I ever heard the word task force, I was a young engineer and I heard it in the corridor. I remember it like yesterday because I remember the expressions on people's faces when they were told leadership are having a task force. Some of them just froze, some of them started swearing, some of them were kind of in denial, but none of them were happy, because they knew something that I didn't know about this task force. This task force to them meant they were going to end up staying late in the evening in offices and rooms, shouting and screaming at each other. They're going to have managers coming in when they wanted to, like Godzilla, changing direction of the team. They were going to have trackers onto them every single day, asking them, is it fixed yet? Is it fixed yet? At the same time, their normal work was going to be piling up, and when the task force was eventually over, they'd come back to all this work they hadn't done, and they'd get no mercy for the fact they haven't completed this work. So for them, the word task force was just a stress. And the kind of question that I asked myself is, could it be done differently? You see, for me, the problem with the task force is actually the origin of a task force and where its name comes from. Now we'll talk about this in a bit more detail, but the origin of task force comes from World War II, and it was actually derived just before World War II started by the Navy. Now, then after World War II, in the 1950s and 60s, government agencies started to use it. They were using it for basically creating ad hoc groups for short-term problems and issues they needed to solve. Then in the 60s and 70s, the term started to be used then by normal average businesses for temporary cross-functional activities. When they needed to bring cross-functional teams that the normal teams couldn't manage, they bring them together and they call them a task force. But as I said again, and we'll go a bit more in detail, that origin from World War II and the usage of it in World War II actually causes us a problem when we want to look at what task forces actually need to do in modern businesses today. So if we look at some of the top reasons to form a task force today, the obvious one is a kind of crisis response from the company, okay? They have an urgent issue, a quality issue, a major customer safety issue, a field campaign issue, or some kind of safety issue that's really urgent that needs to be fixed immediately, and everyone needs to get involved. The other one is complex problem solving, where you need maybe to bring in cross-functional teams that maybe normally don't work together in standard operations, but you need to bring all these teams together to manage a complex problem. They're the kind of two most common reasons that we would think of. Then of course there's things like strategic initiatives. When you have a specific startup initiative you want to do or enter a new market, you might create a task force for that. Or change management, or even things like innovation and improvements may be the same things. Now, it's difficult to know the statistics on this because companies don't normally give away what it is. So it's hard to say, but you probably would think that crisis response and problem solving would be up there. Certainly my personal anecdotal one data point experience is that the majority of task forces are crisis response and problem solving, at least in my industry. Perhaps in other industries it's different. So let's talk then about what's bad about task forces. What do task forces get wrong? Well, quite often if you've been in a task force, sometimes there's an unclear mandate. There's a kind of, we gotta fix the problem, but there's no kind of definition of done. There's no sort of milestones or how do we know we finished or escalation process. Just leadership says, get on with it and fix it. That's kind of the first one, which is a kind of unclear mandate, unclear, really detailed closure point. The other one is poor leadership. Now this might not be the fault of the people involved, it might be the lack of putting the right people in there, but you have no strong leadership, no strong facilitator. You have maybe lots and lots of people joining the meeting, all high level people creating chaos and confusion as each one tugs on the other to fix the problem. The other one then is the wrong composition of the team. So obviously what can happen is you're not bringing in the right people to solve the problem. Maybe the people that are closest to whatever it is you're trying to solve end up in the task force, but they might not be the right people. And of course, the other one, a common one, is lack of authority. Someone might be given a task force specific to their department or area, but then when it comes to being able to have authority to get the resources they need, they might be struggling with that across it. So these are some of the problems you face with a task force. There are many, but these are some of the most common ones. So now, the biggest mistake of task forces, we have to go back and have a little bit of a history lesson. Not too much, but a little bit of a history lesson. You see, the origin of the name task force is the problem with it. You see, it was formalized in 1941 under Admiral Ernest King, then Commander-in-Chief of the US Navy. Now at the time, of course, the Navy was very structured, very rigid, it had fleets and so on. And he was understanding that in modern warfare, at the time it was modern of course, they needed a flexible command structure. He needed to have it was too rigid, you need to have a very fast moving ability to bring different ships and configurations together really fast and quickly to manage the new landscape of war. And therefore he created a task force, or the term task force, where he could then bring in different fleets together on temporary activities, do the activities and tasks, and then after that then they could go back to their normal fleets, taking them away temporarily. And of course, task means duty, care, and force means, of course, force as in military. But you see, the problem is that's great for the military in World War II, but you know what? In modern times, the word task force means something else. And if you want to really manage a task force, or those common reasons why you need one, you need to think of it with a different name. You see, a task force is a temporary activity. The ability to bring people together to do a specific task and you break away. So what's that? That's a project. You see, a task force is a project. And now since 1944 or 41, today, we know a lot about projects. We have a lot of knowledge in industry about how to manage projects. But the point is we're using an archaic term and forgetting that we need to use our modern project management methods to be able to help us solve task forces. Let me give you some examples. For example, if you look at develop project chart, if you look for the PMBOK guides and the processes, defining the objectives, the scopes, the authority of the task force, it gives legitimacy. Plan scope management is critical. So agree on what's in scope, out of scope. Quieting the resources, going through the standard process of resources, things like managing stakeholder engagement, communication plans. Now these don't have to be anywhere near bloated, guess it's tailoring, but if you use these project management principles, and of course the other one is monitoring and controlling the project work, which is tracking the progress, metrics-driven approach to the success of the project, or in this case the task force. You see, all these tools now are available in modern project management, which we don't use because we have this archaic term, task force, and not realizing that it's just a temporary project, maybe with urgency, maybe with importance, but it's a project, and we should be using those skills and in making sure whoever the leader of the task force is actually got project management skills. Now again, everything can be in grades and have to be like a top PMP, whatever, project manager, but they need somebody who has those skills. I have been involved in so many task forces, some good, some really not good, and I do think that the problem is that we really confuse the term. And so I think really that to my conclusion on this, a task force is a project in disguise. And if you ignore that, if the management doesn't understand that, you're going to have drift, you're going to have massive scope creep, you're going to have never-ending meetings, you're going to have turmoil. You see, without that project discipline, the risk is it's going to run out of control and it's just going to become maybe a meeting group. I've been in task forces where they just don't end. They just kind of sort of like naturally dribble out. They have daily meetings. No one has the authority to stop the meetings from being daily. So you just keep going and going and going to eventually everyone says, I think we're kind of done now, right? Leadership are not shouting at us anymore. We'll just close it. Now, task forces today as well can very well be hybrid. I've been involved in task force where we did actually a hybrid approach. We did obviously predictive elements, a lot of the things up front, but then we had some testing elements we needed to do which were fully agile. So treat it as a project, consider it a project, and using all the skills you have. Bring your project managers in at least to get involved and coach the team, and you're going to have much more success on a task force. The task force is not going to be a source of massive stress for people. Some of the things I talked about, which is managing stakeholder engagement and stakeholder communication plans and so on, could all be managed to stop these kind of super trackers and so on. So that's my kind of spin on task forces. I hope you got something out of the video, and thanks for watching.